Hey everyone, it's Bailey. Welcome back to the channel. Today's video I'm going to be talking about some palettes that have really flown under my radar personally, and I feel like they haven't been talked about a whole lot here on YouTube. We've been caught up in the wave of a lot bigger launches lately, a lot of which are good and I have talked about, but as I was looking around, digging through my collection for inspiration and just kind of new things to use and talk about, I came across a few palettes that I realized these are really good and I just don't hear a lot about them. And I've done a couple videos in the past where it's like underrated products or palettes you haven't heard of. I can link that video, click the I or in the description box below. Those are more so indie brands and like brands you really haven't heard of. These I think are brands that a lot of people have heard of. It's just the palettes were kind of a blip on the radar, and in reality I think they deserved a lot more talk time on YouTube just in general. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Let's dive in. The first one I want to talk about is what is on my eyes today. It's the Latte Palette from Untitled Cosmetics, made from fellow YouTuber here. This I picked up a couple months ago from Ulta, and in the flurry of trying everything I got in that haul and then just again other things I was purchasing and or receiving as part of PR, this just kind of fell by the wayside. Even though every time I would pick it up and use it, I really loved it. It was one of those things that wasn't really top of mind because I was trying to try and test something that was hotter or that you guys had questions about, and as a result, and I wasn't seeing a whole lot of other stuff here on it on YouTube, so it just never really occurred to me to kind of pick it up until it was right in front of me. So here's the palette itself. I just slid the sleeve that goes on it. So it comes in this pretty champagne gold sleeve, white cardboard packaging. Open it up inside. There's a sizable mirror in here with some really nice sized eyeshadows as well. So I like this not just for the shadow quality. I mean, baseline across all of these shadow palettes is that the quality has to be there. They can't be chunky or patchy or too dry, anything like that. Like, just know, the shadow quality in all of these is great, otherwise they wouldn't be in this video. What I like about this palette is a selection of textures and shades. So for instance, on this top row, it's an entire row of matte neutrals, everything from a soft cream to two mid-tone shades, one cool, one warm, and then two deeper shades, one cool, one warm. And I love how they're balanced out up here. It's something I haven't seen in a whole lot of palettes. Normally, unless they're like massive palettes, if they're more condensed palettes, there tends to be a choice. Like it's either a warm palette or a cool palette. You don't get the selection of both. So for that, I think this is going to be really suitable for a lot of different skin undertones. What I found I have been doing is using this vanilla cream shade and mixing it with any of these other shades to create those in-between shades that there might not otherwise be in this palette. It's kind of the hard thing you're going to come across with any palette that has a more condensed shadow selection. You're going to be lacking in some of those transitional or in-between shades. So that might be the case for this one, but because they included some of the, deeper shades, although it's not the deepest of the deep, like maybe a matte black would have been nice in here, but you still have a good spectrum from light to dark. And so as a result, you have a lot of opportunity to mix those shadows together to get any shades that might not already be in here. Then you go to the bottom row and you get three super high shine shimmery shades. They do all tend to be on the side of like light to medium shades. Like you don't have any deep shimmery shades in here, but again, you can mix them with a lot of other shades in here to get that color selection. These do tend to be on the cooler side of things, unlike the neutrals up at the top. These all tend towards cool, this one being the coolest, the shade Espresso, but gorgeous high shine like pewter. Oh, it's one of my favorites in the palette. It's what I'm wearing on my eyes today. Macchiato, which is again, I mean, they're all high shine. Let's just get that out there. They're blinding shimmery, but can be applied lightly if you're not all about the basically what is a metallic finish. But Macchiato is another really pretty light highlighter, and then Creme Brulee has more of a pinky undertone, which really complements the purple over here. Speaking of, the other reason why I really love this palette is that there's that pop of color included in here. So many times when you get a basic neutral palette that has been done so many times before, yes, there may be some unique aspect about it, but for the most part, I feel like it's going to duplicate a lot of the neutral shadows I already have in my collection. So if I want to supplement that with any sort of brighter hue or tone or anything like that, I have to add another palette, but it's built in here. And I personally love the shades, like selfishly, purple and this kind of turquoisey emerald teal shade, almost like a deep teal, complements hazel eyes really well. So I personally really like the fact that those are the two kind of brighter colors included in here, but just all together they play so nicely with each other, and I think end up providing a lot of versatility when you think about about mixing and matching all the shades in here. And like I said, just not a palette that you hear a whole lot about, but consider this my recommendation to purchase it if it has been on your list. The next palette I want to talk about comes from a brand that I feel is so underrated here on YouTube, not just for the quality of the products, but for the price point too. It's the brand Profusion Cosmetics, which we all, I feel like, might be familiar with at this point, but again, not one of the most popular brands, I think, for a lot of people. And I've been on their press list for a couple months at this point, so I've had the opportunity to try a pretty broad selection of their products, and I continue to be impressed. Specifically, I actually talked about their highlight palette, another one of my favorites, in, I believe it was a highlight palette roundup video that I can again link, click the I or the description box below, but it's not my first time talking about this brand on the channel, but I really should bring it up more frequently because they're just, it's so good. The palette, the specific palette I'm going to talk about today is the Mixed Metals Peach palette, and it contains 9 matte and metallic shadows. Good size shadows with a nice size mirror and a pretty sleek looking case with that mirrored background. And besides the fact that the palette itself is gorgeous, the eyeshadows perform beautifully, but it also, I mean, there's a striking color palette resemblance to the Urban Decay Naked Heat palette, so to the extent that you had your eye, like that color selection is right up your alley, but you felt like there were a lot of overlapping shadows in the Naked Heat palette, or you just didn't want to spend the money on the Naked Heat palette, this retails for 10 bucks. Granted, you get fewer shadows, although I believe more product per pan than the Urban Decay. You have all of the crucial shades to kind of get the same point across as you might with the Naked Heat palette. You get a broad variety of shadows across the shade spectrum, everything from this light cream shade all the way to this deep chocolatey brown shade. Nice mix of textures. There are 4 matte shades, 5 shimmery shades, 2 more metallic shades, 2 satiny shades, and then there's one really fun shade up here in the corner called Ecstatic that is actually a matte peach base that has a really fun iridescent purpley pink glitter to it. It is more of a distinct glitter, and it does take a little bit of building to really see that on the eye, but it's certainly not something I've seen pulled off in any other palette. So you're not only getting the overall Naked Heat color palette here, but you're also getting some unique shades to boot. One unique shade at the very least. So there is that palette, and then the last one I want to talk about comes from another brand that I actually have not talked about at all, I don't think, on the channel. It is from Collab Beauty, and again, they sent me kind of a starter kit, I guess I would say. It had a wide variety of products from the brand that I've slowly been trying out over the past few months, but the thing that really stuck out to me was this eyeshadow palette. It is the Palette Pro eyeshadow palette in the color or shade or selection of shades called Best of the Day, and kind of like the Mixed Metals Peach palette, this also reminds me of another cult classic palette that maybe people have been putting off purchasing, or they're just looking for a more condensed dupe. I mean, anyone? What does this remind you of? To me, it says the Anastacio Beverly Hills Modern Renaissance palette. And granted, like I said, it is a way more condensed version. Like, you are missing a lot of the nuanced berries or the oranges, but if you just want the abridged version, like the Spark Notes Renaissance palette, this would be it for you, because you have the shimmery, the cream, both the berry and the orange, which I feel like is the crucial color pairing in that Modern Renaissance palette, plus the deeper browns, both a lighter, warmer, almost cherry brown versus the deeper, cooler brown, and then even a shimmery, deep, cool brown in here to boot. So you really have just like a nice sampling of that Renaissance palette in here in a condensed version, but with eyeshadow quality that I would say rivals the Anastacio Beverly Hills version. It's not quite up to par. I say mostly in terms of consistency, like across the board those shadows in the Modern Renaissance palette are buttery, smooth, so pigmented when applied. So it's tough competition. By comparison, these are a little bit firmer, I would say, but you don't have to do a whole lot of swirling, especially in the matte shades, which in my opinion, when you get on the cheaper end of makeup, those tend to be the first to have problems, and that's not the case at all with these. All of them are very smooth, very pigmented. It just takes a little bit of a harder or a firmer touch, not necessarily a harder brush, just a firmer touch to get the amount of product, the same amount of product on your brush to blend in an even way across your eye. as you might if you were using the Modern Renaissance palette. That said though, not stopping me from recommending it, especially if, like I said, you just want a petite Modern Renaissance. So those are all of my picks for underrated eyeshadow palettes. I'm sure I missed some, and it's also totally subjective, so what I think is underrated is just based on what I do or don't see in my YouTube or social newsfeed. So you guys probably have some other ideas about what is underrated in your book, and I definitely want to hear them. Let me know down in the comments below. Besides that, guys, thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye, guys!